Hello, welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm gonna give it a few minutes, let everyone get logged in, and then we'll get started. If you are logging in now, feel free to drop in the chat and let us know where you are tuning in from. We always love to see that. I'll just give it another minute or two here, make sure everyone can get logged in. While you're waiting, if you want to say hello and let us know where you're tuning in from. Patrick's in Seattle, hello. Wonderful. All right, fantastic. I think we can go ahead and get started. Oh, Lisa's in Portland, hi. Love seeing where everyone is tuning in from, always fun. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We are very excited to talk about Rice is Life by Caryl Levine and Ken Lee of Lotus Foods, and they are going to be in conversation with Monique Llamas of Hardcover Cook, a cookbook subscription box. Before we get into that, I'll go over a few things. I'll introduce myself. I'm Zoe Friesen. I'm the events manager here at Book Larder. Book Larder is a community cookbook store located in Seattle, Washington. We sell 100% cookbooks and food writing. So all things food, food and books is what we're all about. We've been doing a lot of virtual events over the last few years, as you can imagine, and we have been excited to roll out some in-person events recently, which has been wonderful, but we also really love doing these virtual events where we can connect with authors and interviewers from all over, as well as you, our amazing community, tuning in from all over. Let's see, we've got someone from Bellingham as well, love it. And of course, Monique is tuning in from Tahoe, which we love. Okay, wonderful. Let's see. I'm just going to go over a few things before I turn it over to the Lotus Foods and crew and Monique. So let's see what else. Okay, so the talk will be recorded and it will be posted up on YouTube within about 48 hours. So if you miss the end, if you have to jump off, you can always catch the end. Or you can send it to a friend or just rewatch or, you know, put it on in the background while you're making a recipe from the book. So that will be available to you. And then let's see. The three of them are going to chat and then they'll leave some time for questions towards the end. So if you have any questions, I just request that you put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat to, you know, chat with each other and me and ask me questions, but for questions for Caryl and Ken, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can support the talk by purchasing a copy of Rice is Life from Book Larder, and I will drop in the chat a link for you to do so. And thank you so much to everyone that has done that already. We appreciate it. We do have book plate signed copies available. So that's what's available to you. Okay, let's see. I think that's about all my spiel. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Caryl, Ken, and Monique.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for Book Larder for inviting me to speak to two natural products industry icons that I've looked up to for quite a while and got to get the opportunity to get to know a little bit through this process and learn a lot more about their cookbook. I'm Monique Llamas. I am the founder of Hardcover Cook. I run a cookbook and ingredient subscription box. And this comes out of my obsession with cookbooks and my love for specialty products. I've spent pretty much my entire career working in the natural products industry, which is how I first learned about Lotus Foods. I'd like to welcome Caryl Levine and Ken Lee. They're the founders of Lotus Foods and the authors of Rice is Life. I'm thrilled to talk to you two tonight.
Thanks, Monique. Nice to be here with you too.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Monique. Really excited to be here. This is our first cookbook. So in a sense, a little bit nervous, but really excited to talk about Rice is Life.
It's wonderful. I mean, as soon as I heard it was coming out, I pre-ordered, and hopefully all the people watching tonight will run to buy it if they don't already have it. I thought we could start our discussion tonight by setting the stage of what a huge role rice plays in the world's dinner plate. It's right there in the subtitle. You say recipes and stories celebrating the world's most essential grain. And I was curious, I actually did a little bit of research. I was curious about the numbers. What I learned, and you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, is it's the third most produced crop in the world, following corn and wheat. And what I thought was even more impressive is average annual rice consumption is 54.3 kilograms per capita of everyone in the world, which if you translate that to pounds, is 120 pounds per person per year, which is pretty incredible. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose that subtitle, it being the world's most essential grain, and what a big role it plays in the world's dinner plate?
Yeah, great question. So there's so many fun facts around rice, but I think just to start with, we can't overstate the role of rice in the world today. Here on planet Earth, more people derive their livelihood from rice than anything else that human beings do. And we're talking about 1 billion people who cultivate rice on over, say, 167 million hectares of land, which is hard to, like, what does that mean? It's like an area comparable to the size of France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK combined. And in fact, rice is grown in every continent except for Antarctica. And actually, more than a half of the world's population derive most of their caloric intake from the consumption of rice. And then culturally speaking, it's interesting to note how rice permeates so many aspects of daily life across the globe. Did you know, well, for instance, in Southeast Asia, especially, people believe rice is the link between heaven and earth. Intertwined in the customs, language, and arts of Asian culture, rice is a symbol of fertility, beauty, sensitivity, prosperity, energy, and life itself. And I thought it's really interesting, kind of a fun fact. Did you know that auto manufacturers Toyota and Honda have rice references? So Toyota means bountiful rice harvest, and
wow.
Honda, not to be outdone, means main rice field. And so, and just, I'm American-born Chinese, but in my culture, if I were to greet you with ni che fan mi or ni hek fan mi, it's basically you're asking someone, have you eaten your rice today? And of course, if they say, answer in the affirmative, that's kind of like, yes, I'm good. And so all these things are very interesting. Like in Thailand and China, when you call your family to eat, you say, eat rice or hek fan, or something like that. And
I might adopt that.
Yeah. And then also in Japan, the word for cooked rice is the same as the word for a meal. So in some cultures, if you haven't, like if you stopped on the way home and had a hamburger or something like that, you really haven't eaten yet. So it's interesting that way.
Also in China, when you have a broken rice bowl, or when you lose your job, you lose your job, they say you have a broken rice bowl. So it's really clear the enormous amount of the role that rice plays in daily life around the world.
Yeah, you've set a beautiful picture for that. So you guys wrote the book on rice, but you started by founding Lotus Foods. And from what I gather, rice wasn't necessarily your intention, but you kind of happened upon it. So why don't you tell us about how you founded Lotus Foods? Just tell us all about it.
Well, in 1993, we took a market research trip through China looking for an opportunity. We were just explorers, we were entrepreneurs, and we had no idea, as you said, that it was going to be ending up in the world of rice. But when we were in Sichuan, which is a southwestern province with 27 different minority groups, we were in a Dai minority village, and we sat down to steaming bowls of black rice. So here, Ken grew up with white rice, and whenever I ate rice, I was a hippie, so I ate brown rice. We never saw black rice. And it had not only such an exotic plate presentation, but it had this beautiful nutty taste with almost like a hint of fruit or floral at the end. And so the next day we ran to the market, which was our favorite thing to do anyway. And we kept on asking people, tell us about Hamey. And the folktale that people told us, whether it was there in Sichuan or in Beijing or any other place that we traveled in within those 2 months, they all told us the same story, that it was called longevity rice or tribute rice. And it was to ensure the long life and good health of the emperors. Because in Chinese medicinal medicine, they say it's a blood tonifier. It aids in the circulation of the blood. It's high in qi. It invigorates the spleen. It brightens the eyes. So when we came back and we actually shipped some samples home and gave it to some of San Francisco's top chefs, and they all wanted it, we realized that we were going to enter the world of rice and the world of CPG. And we knew we wanted to do it a little bit differently as well. So we're really a specialty organic rice company whose intent and vision from the very beginning was to keep the biodiversity of rice alive while partnering with small family farms who were growing rice more regeneratively, but also giving these farmers access to a global marketplace at a fair trade price.
And can I just add along the 27-year journey, we recognize the need to move farmers from conventional methods of growing rice to growing rice in a certified organic way. And while, rice plays a prominent role, as we were talking about, in so many people's lives, there are problems with how rice is traditionally grown. That could be addressed with a new way of growing rice, which we discovered, called the system of rice intensification, or SRI, which of course we market as more crop per drop. So just to give you some context, rice has a major environmental footprint, right? Uses more water than, like when Monique talked about the number 1 and 2 crops, wheat and corn, but rice uses more water than both of those two combined. So when you look at it, say 1/4 to 1/3 of the world's annual supply of freshwater reserves go into the production of rice. And
It's incredible.
And water is very scarce, right? So water, I would say, is our most precious resource. And as you can see, it's increasingly scarce, and climate change induced higher temperatures will increase the need for even more water. And the funny thing is, it's not funny, but the irony is, rice is not an aquatic plant. It doesn't need to be grown in flooded fields. It merely survives that way, doesn't thrive. And so this new way of growing rice that we're advocating is something that can really have positive impacts. So the other thing about all this water, when you flood a rice field, it contributes about 8 to 12% of global man-made methane emissions, further fueling global warming and the extreme weather we're experiencing across the globe right now. In fact, I think right now they just convened COP27 in Egypt to talk about this problem. And for the first time, you see like how food is produced is going to be a major agenda for COP27.
So maybe a little bit later, we'll tell you about what we're doing to mitigate these problems in growing rice, and how we really believe that we have part of the solution.
Yeah,
it certainly seems like it. I'm so impressed. Like, your book, not only is it a cookbook with, I don't know, 100+ recipes. Oops, I'm just trying to remember to show it in front of my face. I meant to show this earlier. Such a beautiful book. But there's so much information packed in here, not just about rice varieties, where it's grown, but you do include a lot of the issues you're talking about. The vast amounts of water rice uses globally in order to produce it. And you talk about your introduction to the system of rice intensification, and that really seemed to be like a light bulb moment. You were already a mission-driven business, but it kind of took you to the next level. And I think you do a really nice job in your book, kind of laying out how important this system is, how transformational it is. I was really struck in particular, you have kind of a list of how it's impacted women farmers in particular. And I think now is a good time, actually, if we can talk a little bit more about the method and the kind of what it is that you're doing with this new system you're helping promote.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned how early on we realized we had to go from conventional using chemical type of farming to something more organic. And then, you mentioned the light bulb moment, and that was when we were introduced to this way of growing rice using SRI, where we realized, the realization was it's not good enough to grow rice without chemicals. We really need it to be something that's more regenerative. And so when at Cornell University, through the Cornell International Institute of Food, Agriculture, and Development, they shared with us that there's a way, like a less is more type of paradigm emerging called SRI, where farmers can use 50% less water, 90% less seeds, and get double and triple the yields. And more than that, sequester carbon, build soil, and mitigate methane emissions, which is 20 times more deleterious than CO2.
And as Monique said, lessen the labor for women. So just by the way we change how rice is grown, we can have economic, social, and environmental impacts, which was, we thought it didn't get better than that. So we really committed ourselves since 2005 into really trying to promote this agroecological methodology, that in the global world of about 60 countries and about 25 million farmers, it's called the system of rice intensification, but we market it as more crop per drop.
It's really great. On your packaging, I have a couple of your products here. We talked about your forbidden rice, which actually, fun fact, I was looking at another cookbook over the weekend. It's Hannah Che's The Vegan Chinese Kitchen, and she tells you to use forbidden rice or other black rice. So your name is stuck. But I just wanted to mention that you do kind of have some additional education about the more crop per drop on all of your packaging. So for those of you out there shopping, looking for Lotus Foods, here's kind of what their package looks like. There's a lot of information here on their packages. I mean, those numbers that you mentioned, Ken, are pretty impressive. I think, did you say it's like a third of the world's fresh water is used to cultivate rice? And if you can cut that by half with the system, I feel like you're onto a pretty incredible solution for fixing some of the world's problems. So I hope by getting this cookbook out there, sharing more with more people, we can all help evangelize and spread the word of this great movement.
I just want to also recognize Chronicle Books, because albeit a cookbook first, they really wanted and gave us the opportunity to tell our story. So we really are so thankful, because it is a cookbook, but the cookbook, we really wanted to share so much more information why rice is such an essential grain.
Yes, and they've done a wonderful job, as you have as well. So we talked a little bit about Lotus Foods. So my introduction to Lotus was, I've worked in the natural products industry pretty much my entire career. And in my first job, I was a buyer for a distributor, and we had a guest vendor come present their products, and it was Lotus Foods. And at that point in my life, I was pretty much a Calrose rice eater. I grew up in California. We ate Calrose all the time in different ways, but that was the rice we ate. So it was really eye-opening to me to be introduced to your forbidden rice, to be introduced to your Bhutanese red white rice, to be introduced to the fact that there was all this diversity in rice. And it was just so captivating and interesting. And I've remembered that, my entire time in my career, because it really stood out as, wow, this is what food can be. And since then, I've become just a huge food explorer. So thank you for doing what you do. I'm hoping that you can kind of tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you talk about biodiversity in rice. It's kind of central to your business. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more. And I'm also going to share a photo from the book. I believe these are all Lotus Food rices. Oops, I wish my background's not helping. There's just beautiful images in the book of the diversity of rice that you guys produce.
You're seeing the brown, the black rice, the red, white rice, and then the jade pearl, which I'll talk a little bit about it. But, back in 1995, when we first began, the landscape of rice looked like, well, the most exotic rices from faraway places were basmati and also jasmine. There was a little bit of arborio for risotto, some sushi rice. But that was probably, all that there was. And then so when we found the the forbidden rice, the black rice, and the red rice. The first red rice we had was from the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. So we were really the pioneers in bringing pigmented specialty rices of black and red origin
Well,
to this
pigmented,
country.
just like apples or potatoes or grapes have different skin color. So there's red, black, and brown. And so really a lot of these pigmented varieties weren't really known that well.
And they're the whole grains that have more nutritional value, like a brown rice. And so when you have a black pigment or black covering over the grain, it's the phytonutrient is called anthocyanin. And that has so many nutritional aspects to it, along with the fiber, more vitamins, more phytonutrients. And
well, they also, they attack free radicals. And so these are things that could be cancer causing. So, I think that's, when we first work with chefs, that the thing that we realized is it has to taste good and good for you. And we certainly found that this was a treasure trove of, tapping into heirloom varieties of rice. You may not have ever had an heirloom variety of rice, but if you had heirloom tomatoes, you just know that those things just taste so much better, and they're also more nutritious. And the same thing with heirloom rice.
Scientists actually estimated that at one time there was about 140,000 different varieties of rice cultivated around the world. But unfortunately, we're really only, modern agriculture and the promotion of new varieties and, monoculture production has really tremendously affected, and we've lost so much rice biodiversity.
Yeah, so nowadays, a lot of these seeds, they only exist in seed banks. And so they're not actually on-field production. Whereas, a lot of this resilience that we're going to need because of the climate that is right there in these seeds, because they were the ones that have lasted through millennia. Whereas these attempts to come up with drought resistant, they already exist, is what I'm trying to say. And so we really need to promote the biodiversity of rice.
Yeah, and how do you do that? How do you support the biodiversity? Is it just creating a market here? Is it how you work with the farmers? Like how do you, with what you do, promote biodiversity?
Question, because as a rice company, you can't like bring in 140,000 varieties of rice, right? It's like usually, as as being in a food distributor, you go and pitch new stuff, and oh yeah, you got 10 varieties. What give me the 3 best, right? The ones that sell. That's what help people operate. But when you look at the world scene, only about 10% of all rice is even traded. It crosses borders, and so. We talk about local a lot, but local for rice, most rice is actually consumed within 10 miles of where it's grown.
Wow. And
all that rice that we talked about earlier in those numbers. So,
but every place, even the Native Americans have their wild rice. There's a sense of place. Actually, rice is all about terroir, which means sense of place. So I remember in India, somebody came up to us and said to us, or no, they were from Indian origin, and they said to us, "Can you get this mango scented rice?" This was a rice that came from their village, and probably the reason why it was mango scented rice because the rice fields were surrounded by mango trees, which are plethoric in India, and so that created the mango scented rice. So these are, when we were in Bhutan and that was our second rice that we imported, the Minister of Agriculture thanked us for helping to keep the biodiversity of that rice alive, because most of their products were coming from India. And it was cheaper that the farmers still loved their beloved red rice and they would grow it for themselves. But until you create a market, which is exactly what you were talking about, then there is no incentive for the farmers to actually produce these varieties. So that's what we have to do. We have to continue to educate the consumer so that there'll be markets for these incredible varieties of taste, texture, color, and aroma and cooking qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you ever find a way to bag that mango scented rice, it sounds amazing, and I'd love to have some. On the topic of rice varieties, I mean, as you mentioned, it's grown on every continent except for Antarctica. Can you kind of walk us through just like the basics? Like, what are the main varieties? What's out there?
Yeah, there's so many kinds. Caryl already mentioned like risotto rice, right? So most people I think know arborio rice, but there's also carnaroli, and then there's like violoni nano, and these are things I think you can get if you go to specialty stores. But that's wonderful because it has the ability to absorb all that liquid as you're stirring a risotto, and it creates this wonderful creaminess. And then similar. There's in Spain they make paella, which is really wonderful. And so there's varieties called like baldo,
Bamba.
bamba, yeah. But
Yeah.
baldo is another one.
Yeah.
So there's many kinds. If you go to Italy and ask what's the best risotto rice, they'll tell you the one that they grow, right? So it's
Of course.
it's really fun. It's really fun to experiment with them all. So of course you mentioned the rice you grew up eating, and that's kind of more that Japanese style rice. Which you find grown largely in Northern California domestically, but there's so many other kinds. Our jade pearl rice, the green one that's infused with bamboo extract, that's kind of a Japanese style rice. It's a short grain rice that is grown in China. That's really wonderful.
There's a red rice in France that's grown in the Camargue Valley. And that's a beautiful red rice. It makes, the French love to make pilafs with that. In Thailand, you have their famous hamali rice, which is their aromatic jasmine rice. In Cambodia, it's called kamali. It's the same aromatic rice. It's just that's what they call the hamali in Cambodia.
Well, we're talking about jasmine. We can't forget basmati. So we were talking a little about that, and you find a wonderful aromatic kind of so that's our land rice. Yeah.
What happened to the basmati in India and why?
Yeah, so most rice from India, we think the authentic basmati rice comes from India, but mostly what we get from India is like a hybridized variety. It's called pusa. And why did they do that? Well, the traditional varieties, like the one that you were just holding up, Monique, that's traditionally called Dehradun rice. And that rice is a traditional variety. It stands up tall when it grows, which is not a good thing because when the monsoon winds blow, that plant may topple. It's called lodging, and lodging can really mess up your yields and destroy a lot of harvest.
Let's share a little in that.
Well, I'm just trying to say that's why they grew this shorter, stumpier variety. And so the pusa actually elongates like a normal basmati does, but it doesn't have that wonderful aroma. And so that's because of, like I was going to say, typically they'll use basmati rice to make biryani. It's another kind of almost like a pilaf, but wonderfully aromatic because they put all these aromatic spices in there. So if you have all those aromatic spices, maybe that's why they decided to do away with that aromatic character in the pusa basmati rice. So,
but
it's
the
confusing.
basmati that we are bringing in is what is called not just a traditional and heirloom, it's a land race. It has never been changed. It has just gone from generation to generation, and it's what we call the mother of all basmatis. Yeah. And so, but I think it would be great if people just tried it for themselves and really could tell the difference between this basmati and some of the basmatis that are imported now.
All right, I'm up for the challenge. I feel like this is my life. I get like three different brands of the same product and then try them side by side. And I love the flavor exploring. So since we're kind of starting to talk about the culinary side, I think it's time to really dive into the cookbook. Firstly, I love the chapters you have in here. I don't really need an excuse to eat more rice, but you start off with an eggs and rice chapter, which my mind reads as breakfast. I've already had one of your recipes as breakfast. You have a snacks and soups chapter, which I've never really thought of rice as a snack, but I'm certainly thinking about it more now. You go into mains, desserts. You really invite us to explore throughout the day all different kinds of rice and ways to cook it. All of your recipes, and you mentioned that you did this very thoughtfully. Rice has a starring role in your dishes. So I just think it's fabulous. There's 100 or so ways. I actually don't know how many recipes are in here. Do you happen to know?
There are 65 recipes, I believe.
65 feels like 100. You're not going to get bored with this book. Lots of amazing recipes, lots to explore. There's a real clear global lens in the recipes, and we've kind of touched on that with, you know, all the varieties there are out there. And then you've also touched on the fact that most people eat their local rices, so they have kind of like local rice traditions. So I'm wondering, you have this whole world of rice cultures to draw on. How'd you decide, like, how'd you approach creating this book? How'd you decide what to include?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's a great question. And, you know, Rice's Life is really our love letter to rice, to rice noodles. You know, it really came out of our 25th anniversary, where we thought, what a great opportunity. It was really our desire to share our world of rice. You know, we were so fortunate to travel the world and taste, you know, the most exotic rices from faraway places. And since, you know, you can eat rice the entire day, as, you know, you just said, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, dessert, even drinks, you know, we had a plethora of ideas. And it was really very hard to figure out how to segment it all and what to include. So we actually partnered with Kristen Donnelly, who's a very well-known cookbook author, who developed just the right balance of recipes, you know, between traditional and creative upstarts, that, you know, that what we were trying to do is achieve a global sensibility, but be able, but that everybody who was using it, they could use any rice that they wanted, that it also could be adopted to vegan cookery. But the most important was easy to prepare. So I hope we accomplished that. We spent a lot of time making sure, because, you know, there's so much variety out there, and variety is the spice of life. So we really hope you enjoy what we chose.
It's interesting, you know, when Caryl mentioned drinks, I don't think most people think about drinking rice, right? But, you know, look at horchata, you know, like the Mexican rice milk type of drink. But then there's also, you think about sake, you know, so sake is a rice wine.
There you go. Yep.
And so it's just, there's many, many things. And I think really what we charged Kristen with doing was, hopefully the message comes through that, you know, recipes are a guide, and that, you know, we can really modify them. Once you learn a technique, then it can be many different things. So when you say hundreds, I think maybe thousands.
I'm sure. Yep. And on the global variety, it's pretty impressive. I started to list it out, and the task became too great. I stopped, but just to share with the audience a little bit of what you might find inside, there's Persian-inspired dishes, Italian-inspired dishes. There's a Greek avgolemono. There's Japanese furikake rice balls. There's a few Thai-inspired dishes, Indian dishes, Vietnamese, French. I had no idea that the French had a rice tradition at all, and especially not red rice. Malaysian, American South, gulagichi, Middle Eastern. I mean, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I mean, that list goes on and on. So among those 65 recipes, there's huge variety of flavors and techniques.
And the other thing, Monique, that Chronicle allowed us to do is we actually have some recipes from some of our farmers. So we have recipes from some of our Indian farmers, from our Thai farmers, and from our farmers in Indonesia. So, you know, a traditional nasi goreng is just like, you know, fried rice. And there's a couple of pulaus from India, and there's a curry from Thailand. And it's really wonderful that we could also name the farmer and share with them all the food that they've inspired us in our travels.
And when, you know, Caryl mentioned the nasi goreng, that was kind of piqued my interest, because I grew up in a family that had a Chinese restaurant, and so I learned how to make fried rice, but it's more of the classical fried rice. But I was looking at my wok the other day, and I was like, I think I must have made about 500 fried rices so far in my life in that wok. But I was thinking it'd be really interesting to kind of try other flavors, you know, And so the nasi goreng is a Indonesian, right,
Mhm,
recipe.
mhm.
And it's got things like really pungent things like fish sauce and and maybe anchovies and stuff like that, or can't remember if you can bring it up. But I think the idea is just to play with the recipes. If you have a particular set of flavors that you like, it doesn't have to be like my tamari sauce or soy sauce with maybe some oyster sauce and white pepper. These are like classic things that I would put in there. So I think that's the great thing about recipes. You can kind of switch them up.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you do give some nice guidance about how to cook rice, but I feel like it's very kind of loose. Like you can soak or not soak. You can rinse or not rinse. You can salt or not salt. But you give the guidance and reasons why you might do it or not, but you kind of leave it up for people to explore. Why don't we dive into the recipes a little bit? I was thrilled to see your essay on For the Love of Crispy Rice, because I love crispy rice. I've thought if I ever write a cookbook, which I don't anticipate, it would probably be about crispy rice. I'd love for anyone in the audience, like if you want to chime in and share your favorite crispy rice or really any rice recipe, I'd love to hear. My family, we make arroz con gandules, which is a Puerto Rican recipe, and we fight over the pegao, which is basically the burnt bits, the crispy bits on the bottom. So I love seeing your essay, and I would love you just to share a little bit more and some tips on how to get crispy rice if you're seeking it.
I love that you bring that up because, as a rice company selling goods to folks, we get a lot of complaints. Like they talk about, they're using a rice cooker, or they're using, more times it's with a pot with a tight fitting lid, because you get that crispiness. In my family's culture, we call that nung, but in Persia, in Iran, they call that tadip, and every rice eating culture has a name for it. And it's kind of the revered thing that, like in your family, you fight over it. In other places, it's kind of offered to the guest of honor. And so we get complaints, people saying, how do we not do that? And it's like a waste of rice. But I try to share with them that this is something that's time honored and revered. So it's interesting. Just like it's interesting where people kind of get scared of cooking rice. And I think it's because maybe, we haven't always been a rice eating culture, maybe more European from the beginning. So I think there's a hesitancy or anxiety about cooking rice. So I think there's a section too talking about, I think there's like a stovetop method or
the stove absorption top method, right? And also rice cookers. So our rice cooker, we use a stainless steel rice cooker, and it was actually a Lotus Foods branded rice cooker, which unfortunately we don't, we're not importing anymore. But one of the reasons why, it was actually our Natural Foods customer who taught us why stainless steel was so much more important than the Teflon, because if you scratch the Teflon, you can then
you expose the aluminum underneath the Teflon. And of course, aluminum has been shown to have some negative health impacts.
But with the stainless steel and not having a non-stick surface, you would get that crispy rice bottom, which we revered, but people would think, oh my goodness, this burnt or it's scorched.
Don't throw out the rice.
But it's really, and then, what we love to do with that scorched bottom, or just the bottom that sticks, is just you put a little bit of water in there and you put it back on cook. And that's where you actually make either a porridge with it or a rice drink out of it. And in Madagascar, that was something that they did every single day, because they didn't want to waste any grain, and rice was so important that they would always make a porridge or a drink from the bottom of the rice bowl pot.
Perfect. So your vessel matters, and there's definitely something you can do with it, even if it's maybe a little off. I know that there's a page in here where there's some troubleshooting. If your rice is too sticky, too wet, etc. So you kind of offer guidance for all of that.
Yeah, I think growing up, I used to measure like the 2-knuckle method, but that's, I think, sound for a white rice. And then we got into all these pigmented rice. I really didn't want to take chances, like especially if we're doing a cooking demonstration in a store. So what I started doing was measuring. And I think it's important because if you know how much water you put in and your rice came out too mushy, well, then back down the water, or if it was too al dente, add more water. So just by measuring, it's a good reference. And some people live at altitude, so the boiling time is longer. So I think if you start as a baseline, just measuring the amount of water, you can kind of play with it and figure it out according to your taste.
I have the altitude issue, and I sometimes do stovetop. I sometimes do, which you mentioned, the like boiling method, like a pasta boiling almost. So you don't necessarily have to have all the water absorbed. You can also pour it off. But I have to say, I rely.
When you pour it off, you're pouring off all those water soluble vitamins.
I'm going to make horchata next time. I do tend to lean on my rice cooker for most of my cooking, unless it's like in a dish. But yeah, my rice cooker comes in handy too, and it seems like that's totally fine by your standards too. Let's talk about some more recipes.
Rice cooker is nice too because it has a warming setting, and so sometimes you have people coming home at different times, eating different times, and or you have like a long dinner party, and it's kind of a bummer if your rice goes cold and you're still eating.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few questions coming in, so I want to make sure we answer those. But I was going to ask you about your fried rice method, which maybe this is related. So I'm going to ask one of the audience questions. This is from Patricia. She's asking about favorite childhood memory involving rice or favorite discovery. We can talk about fried rice separately if you have something else you want to draw on, but it made me think of that.
Well, the story I like to tell is I grew up in Rhode Island. My father and his 4 brothers, they started a Chinese restaurant in, I say in book Providence, Rhode Island, but it's Warwick where the airport is, and they call that Providence. Anyways, I digress. So the moment that hit me was I was graduating from college and decided to move out of Rhode Island to go to Houston, Texas. And then the horror hit me. I was like, there's always been a restaurant since I've been alive, and I'd go there and eat this wonderful food, and yet I didn't know how to cook any of it. So I went to my dad to say, teach me to cook some of these things. And what's in the recipe book is, it says Ken's fried rice, but it's really my dad's fried rice. And I think that was the story that I like to tell because, fried rice is something I think was popularized in the 2nd century BC or something like that. By an emperor in the Sui dynasty. And probably about 4 centuries later, it kind of trickled down to the common kind of peasantry in China. And at the time, they had been through 400 years of warring. And I think it was by necessity. You would take things like leftover rice, eggs, scallions, and you'd make something out of nothing. And this kind of goes right through the tremendous migration of Chinese around the world and being in a new land. Immigrants, they've been doing this and will continue to do this and take just what they can muster up, what's laying around, and take an unfamiliar land in a place they're trying to do something and actually make something that's something that is familiar, but kind of turning nothing into something. And so I really look at fried rice as that. And so when we go to make fried rice, like if you look at the recipe in the book, at the time, we were foraging out of like wild leeks, or Caryl had asparagus coming out of the garden. And so we would use things that were seasonal. And, to promote the book, what's coming out of the garden is the last bits are like Brussels sprouts and onions and garlic, and then you just open the refrigerator. I had a piece of leftover bratwurst that was cooked. I just chopped that up into little pieces, and I blended that all together. And you just put together what you have. And
so it's a great way to use leftovers in your refrigerator.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is you want old rice. You want rice that's been cold.
Yeah, if you cook fresh rice, then it's like too soggy. If you do have fresh rice, then cook it off and then sheet it and fan it and
cool it
down. But otherwise, when you put the rice in the refrigerator, there's something called retrogradation, right? Which is, the rice turns hard and it's clumpy and you don't really know what to do with it, but fried rice is a perfect way to reinvigorate it.
I love that we're getting some food science in here too. So fried rice sounds like the ultimate clean out the fridge formula. And it's funny, as you were speaking, I was thinking, oh, I just read someone's newsletter about their love of turning nothing into something. And you know who it was? It's Kristen Donnelly. I just signed up for her newsletter today. So earlier, Ken and Caryl mentioned that their co-author was Kristen Donnelly, who some of you may know is the co-host of the Everything Cookbooks podcast, all about cookbooks. She has her own newsletter, which I just happened to sign up for today, and she had a nice kind of about me. And that was one of the things. I'm like, yeah, I imagine her making fried rice. I wonder if you've had that conversation with her.
Oh yeah. Ken,
Yeah.
for the book, she and Ken spent many hours talking about fried rice, and Ken showing her his method of making fried rice. But I think the one thing that Ken forgot to mention is that what I love about Ken's story is that when his father was teaching him how to make this fried rice, he was not just teaching him how to make fried rice. He was teaching him about life itself.
Yeah, because he was talking about, the order in which you blend stuff. Like you want to cook the hearty vegetables first because you don't want them. You want everything to have a nice harmonious blend, or you heat the wok up and get the oils, all the aromatics in there first to kind of flavor the. And so, I was thinking my dad taught me how to cook fried rice, but I think he was really talking about how to get along with people and have a more inclusive conversation. And I think nowadays we really need more of that. So maybe we can start by practicing up on our fried rice and then go out and have better dialogue with people who think
that's a great place to start. Yep. Caryl, I want to give you the opportunity to answer the question about favorite food memory or rice discovery as well. Anything come to mind for you?
Well, my given name is Levine, but actually it was Lukshin when my ancestors came over from Poland, and Lukshin means noodle. So I'm really a noodle head.
I thought you were just joking earlier. I love that.
So I love noodles. And so I love that although we're a rice company, we're also a rice noodle company. And so we started with the pad thai rice noodles, and now our newest, which I'm really, really proud about, and also hope people try it, is the udon brown rice noodle. It's the first udon noodle that's brown rice. And I really love the soba rice noodle, which is buckwheat and brown rice. And so in the book, you can show that. Well, there's
also our pad thai noodles. So we have the white rice, there's brown rice, and then this one is, of course, with our forbidden rice, which is black rice, pigmented variety of rice.
I have one here I bookmarked to make later, which looks like it uses your pad thai. It's the spicy noodles with bok choy and pork or tofu.
This is the one that I really, really love because it uses green tea, which I'm also a big fan of, green tea. So this is called soba noodles with green tea broth and smoked salmon. And of course you can make this vegan, you could do anything with it, but it's inspired by Japanese. It's just so simple yet so flavorful. But to me, noodles are food for my soul. They just really they're so warming, and they're just home. I just love it. Last night it was late when we finished work, and we were tired and hungry, and we made ramen. And it was just perfect.
Wonderful. We have a couple more questions here. One actually on the Japanese theme. Patrick is asking, he hasn't seen the cookbook yet, any recipes using a Japanese donabe, or maybe recipes they could cook in a donabe, the clay vessel?
Right, yes, there is. Kristen does talk about that, I believe. And I think there are some recipes, because that is a wonderful way to cook rice and to cook Japanese one-pot meals too. So yes, I don't know. We can look through it and see, but I think there might be. Let me go look at the end.
Is there a way to get back to Patrick?
Yeah, maybe Zoe can help us get back in touch with Patrick. Patrick, we'll try to get back to you. Another question from, while Carol's looking that up, from, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Alyssa. she's not cooking in a rice cooker and wonders if you should cook rice in cold water or add to boiling water.
We like to start with cold water.
Yeah.
And let it bring that to a boil. So if you're on the stovetop and you're using the stove absorption method, which is really how, most everybody cooks rice, if not using a rice cooker, then you just want to take the rice and the cold water, and we like to put a pinch of salt in it too.
She likes to
Bring
put a
that-
pinch of salt. I don't.
Bring that to boil, and then cover it and reduce the heat.
Great.
And then just time your rice.
I'm curious about your comment there, Ken. Of course, we all come with different food perspectives and preferences. Is there a reason why one of you prefers salt and one of you doesn't? Is it just flavor or?
I think Carol's, like most times, salt brings out the really good flavor in all foods. For me, it's just not something in a Chinese home that we ever did. And so I don't know the reason why. So sometimes we just do.
Yeah, cultural is a reason. Yeah, great. Anyone else in the audience, if you have questions, we're going to be wrapping up probably in a few minutes here, but it's not too late if you want to put something in there. Let's see. Sorry, 1 second here. I lost my screen. Where are you? Okay. Hi. Oh, Zoom. How fun it is. Let's talk about a few more recipes. So I've made a couple. I made your cheesy rice cake. It was it was in the egg and rice chapter. I made it for breakfast. It's not exactly the method of crispy rice that you describe in the crispy rice section, but for anyone who loves crispy rice, I just want to plug it because you add cheddar cheese. That's kind of a mixture of like rice, egg, cheddar, scallions that you cook in a pancake. It cooks really quick in just a couple of minutes. Super simple. Just like you said, you were kind of going for like easy, simple. This recipe is it. I was able to make it before work one day and have a fabulous breakfast. But just the cheese egg mixture just creates a beautiful crispy crust on both sides because you flip it. That was great. I also made your miso glazed eggplant with brown rice and seaweed. It's kind of like a rice salad. I love that, you have so many global influences, but there's a lot that you also kind of riff on. And you mentioned in the head note of that particular recipe that it's the kind of thing you'd find in a health food store. So happy to see your hippie roots in there, Caryl. I wonder if there's some other recipes that you were kind of inspired by your life, but not necessarily like any particular like cultural reference point, like recipes that you created on your own or that you just make all the time at home.
So one of the things when you talk about the crispy, that's also another recipe that you made for with the cheese for using leftovers. One of the other things we love to do that's not in the cookbook, that after we make a risotto, we always make double the amount of risotto. And then the next day, because of the retrogradation of the rice, basically we form a rice patty and then we put it on a griddle and we make a rice cake out of it, a rice patty. And then
So you cook it at a high heat so the bottom gets crispy.
Yes.
And it's not like we didn't add egg to bind it together.
or breadcrumbs.
So
or
as long as
anything.
it stays intact, you slide your spatula underneath and flip it over.
And I know you have instructions to make that. Is it riso al salto or something along those
And
lines?
then we always put
So
a
it must be a
poached,
risotto
we
recipe.
put a poached egg on top of that.
Yeah.
And it's our favorite brunch recipe.
Great. We have a nice comment in the Q&A from David who says he just went to PCC in Seattle. I don't live in the area, but that market is awesome. I've definitely been. I know it's a chain of restaurants. They bought your Forbidden Rice Ramen and Jade Pearl Rice Ramen packages. Hasn't tasted either yet, but was intrigued by the beautiful packaging and your product. Presentation tonight's excellent. Thanks for chiming in there, David.
Thank you for being a customer, David.
Yeah. Patricia, I appreciate your question. She's asking a little bit about Hardcover Cook. I'm not going to talk about it too much here because I want you guys to all buy your books. With Booklarder, I curate a subscription box that's quarterly, cookbooks paired with specialty ingredients, kind of pairs my professional background and my love of cookbooks. Happy to chat with you offline another time. Thanks, Patricia. I think before we wrap,
Monique was the perfect person to moderate this,
oh, thanks.
this chat. So thank you so much, Monique. We really enjoyed speaking with you too.
Of course. And the one thing I would love to kind of end on is if you could recommend a couple recipes that people should check out, a few of your favorites, a few that maybe people haven't tried before that really showcase your rice, like maybe one of your forbidden rice recipes. Would love people to go away with extra bookmarks in their book.
Absolutely. So I have one that from this weekend, it says here, because I have a lot of bookmarks on mine. It says make tonight, and it's because it's beet. Well, let me show you a picture of it because it's really beautiful.
I have to say the entire book is so beautiful. Every food photo, as well as all of like the farmer photos of the rice fields, everything's just gorgeous.
This is called beet rice bowls with avocado chickpea spread. And the reason why I loved it, I just harvested my beets out of the garden, and I had some fresh avocados, and I always have chickpeas. And I just thought, oh my God, what a fantastic combination. So it uses the forbidden rice, and then it makes a puree with the chickpeas and the avocado, and then the roasted beets. So again, the colors are
pretty. The colors are.
It is absolutely gorgeous.
And just to me, that just is such a simple yet elegant and nutritious way to eat a rice bowl. So, we always say from our rice bowl to yours, happy cooking and with love and, delicious wishes. And that's what we wish for everybody who joins us on this Rice is Life World of Rice journey.
Excellent. Ken, are there any other recipes you want to plug for people to try?
I haven't made it yet, but I'm fascinated with that horchata, that rice milk type of a drink. But I have, we've been so busy with just the business that I haven't been able to actually jump in and cook a lot of these myself. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, we actually make the black rice risotto with dashi scallops and furikake butter. That was also a favorite.
I have that one bookmarked to make this week as well. So I'm glad that it has the stamp of approval. I will imagine from your rice bowl to mine when I eat it.
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic.
Yeah, I was skeptical because the black rice isn't the ideal kind of risotto kind of rice, but it really works.
Awesome.
That's a great recipe.
I see Zoe's popped in here. Hi, Zoe.
Hello, I'm taking down a lot of notes of recipes to try as well. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining us. Of course, Caryl and Ken from Lotus and Monique from Hardcover Cook. It's been such a joy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks, you, Monique.
Everybody.
We really enjoyed it. Thanks to the audience.
Congratulations. It's such a fantastic book. And yes, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in this evening. The recording will be up on YouTube within about 2 days or so. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
nice
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.